and welcome to a much anticipated, by some people, third episode of Musings of a Genre Slut. I am Michelle Lee. I am a speculative fiction author, horror, science fiction, fantasy, smutty smut. And I also work in game design, tabletop RPGs, help write for that, and run professionally for a couple of local gaming companies. I've been having some problems coming up with this episode, not because I don't have the ideas, I have so many ideas, but because I'm not really a fan of looking at myself on video, and you kind of have to in order to make these. But thanks to some wonderful peer pressure, namely from a coworker named Stacy. Hi, Stacy, who has been getting big into book talk and like, Michelle, you should do that. You could totally do that. You'd be a great person to do that. I figured I should probably actually get back to doing that. So I have my water. I have my book with all my ideas in it, and I have some books that I want you to read, or maybe not read. Today I want to talk, today's topic is going to be fairy smut. I, for the record, have not read Ektar. In fact, I have been told by multiple people not to read it, that I would hate it. And they are people who I trust because they know my taste in books. So instead, I'm going to be bringing you a number of other fairy-themed books that I have liked quite a bit. First, though, let's do my sampler section. That is where I read the free sample that you can get from Kindle Unlimited or Smashwords, and decided if it was a book I wanted to continue reading or not. So the first one is House of Beating Wings by Olivia Wildenstein. So I bought it. So that pretty much means I really, really wanted to read it. It is a gorgeous book with lots of inside art. And one of my favorite things, a map. I'm a fond of fantasy worlds with maps. Especially if the author does their best to draw one and they are not terribly artistic, because it really shows that they have thought about it and put a lot of world building into it, in my opinion. So show me your maps, authors. I want to see them. Anyway, this one, I really liked it. The sample is very lovely prose. There is just a little bit of the not like other girls trope. And maybe it's going to be a secret chosen one. Probably it's going to be a secret chosen one. I really liked the world setting and the character building. An important thing for me is not just the main character, but also the side characters. And the main character she is very, very connected and has very strong friendships. And she doesn't even just have strong friendships, but there are just some other characters that are involved and not necessarily friends and not necessarily antagonists, and having like really realistic relationships with, in this case, her grandmother, friends she grew up with. All of that really, it helps me connect to a book. So I definitely wanted to get into it and read it. And I did, and I will be probably covering it in later video, because I read the whole series and I want to maybe break down what really, really worked for me. Because you authors out there also really like to know what works for people and what doesn't. So I am an equal opportunity reader. The other book that I read, I did not buy a copy of. It was The Dark Elf's Secret Baby by Celeste King. It also had a map. I really like that. The opening was okay. It was very, very vibrant, very visual. The main character is a miner, so that's a really unusual, hard job. It is a tale of, dark fae who oversee all of this culture, and a woman who has fallen in love with one. It didn't really excite me. It was pretty repetitive as far as the lines that they were using, and I wasn't really super passionate about the characters in general, the main character and her hero. They weren't, super. I wasn't buying it. They didn't have an unrequited love. They didn't have a lot of tension. Their primary conflict was that their love was forbidden, and they didn't really seem to be trying in any way to handle that. So I just didn't really care to continue, unfortunately. So on to the main course. These are books that I have devoured several times, especially this seems to be my current obsession. The third book or the fourth book in the series comes out in October, and I have read these books. I first read them for the last time last fall, and I have read them 4 times already, and will probably read them again when the next book comes out. But this is the Wild Fae series from Kate King. I I mean, it gets my brain turned on like very few books have in the past. It is the story of Lonnie Skyborn. She is a human who her mother was a changeling. So her mother was kidnapped from the human realm and brought into the world of the Fae. Her mother absolutely hates the Fae for very good reason, because I really like books that play up the Fae are inhuman and just not like people. They don't have the same morals. They don't have the same feelings. Stuff like that. So I'm going to read the first page. Well, about the first page, and then we're going to go more from there. The most honest people in the world were liars. From the time I could talk, every other word out of my mouth was a lie, and I was glad of it. People usually lied for good reasons: to protect loved ones, to lessen bad news, oh, to lessen bad news, or simply without conscious thought. The Fae never lied, but they told more falsehoods than any human I knew. They never downplayed their exhaustion or told a friend they looked lovely to spare hurt feelings. They twisted their words into knots, taking pleasure in confusion and cruelty while hiding behind the moral superiority of forced honesty. Lying well and often was a necessary skill in the high court of Elsewhere. It was our best weapon against the Fae. At least that's what my mother told me. So Lonnie and her twin sister live in this world that is run by the Fae. And there's this very interesting convention in her Fae world that, maybe might be, I'm not sure what order the books were written in, but might be a nod back to ACOTAR, because a lot of things do, because it's pretty influential there. But it is, and it has a map. Again, I like the maps. I guess that's the role player in me. But so when a new king comes to power, I'll read it. Today was the first trial for the new Everlast King, Lord Penvali. The land of Elsewhere had no hereditary royal family. Instead, one house wore the crown until another house took it from them. Every time the crown changed hands within the ruling house, as it had when Queen Cecilia had returned to the source over the winter, the hunting began. During each of the 5 hunts of the season, anyone was permitted to challenge the house for the right to rule. So it's really interesting that being the king immediately puts you in the position where you're going to be hunted, and that's a theme that I really enjoy through the books, particularly through the first book. That you have to prove it with might that you can keep the crown. Literally, you are hunted in various trials and through the woods. In this case, and you have to literally keep that crown, which is very interesting when, as you expect, our main character kills the king and manages to take the crown. So now she's the one who's going to be hunted. Some of the other complicated relationships that I really like in here is the entire royal family, the Everlasts, have a very complicated relationship with each other. This is a reverse harem, a Why Choose series. So the two male, it's also got a touch of fated mates. So the two male mates, they are actually cousins, which is really interesting. I like reverse harems when the males also have a healthy relationship with each other. They don't necessarily have to have a literal romantic relationship with each other, although that's a lot of fun too. But when they have a healthy relationship, and I really think that despite all of these men's tortured past, because yes, tortured male past, and fairies and ruling fairies who are, well, they're not Unseelie. One of them is part Unseelie, but still, uh, it's it's tangled and twisted. It definitely was not a healthy childhood, considering that you get the crown by killing the previous person. But the relationship between the two leads is absolutely one of the healthiest relationships, and they're very, very attached to each other. They're quite literally some of the only things they care about is helping those two members of their family. And I particularly like that kind of thing. I'm a fan of found family, and this is definitely found family, even if they are also blood family. So Lonnie, of course, gets herself in the middle of this. She It's a pretty awesome scene when she kills the king, because there's no extra magic, there's no clever assassination attempt. And this is a spoiler, but that's okay, it's really early in the series, she literally beats him to death with his own crown, which is just is a really bold move. I really like that as an author and a reader. I'm like, hell yeah, yeah, let's see that. She does so after her twin sister is revealed to be part of a rebellion that is trying to take over the kingdom. So we have a lot of plot threads already, and then we also have a lot of characters who are already engaged, way more engaged in the plot than they realize. There's Scion, who will be the next in line to be king after Penvali dies. And he really does care for his people and his family, and he really does want, despite I don't want to say he's a cinnamon roll, because it's not completely a cinnamon roll. He doesn't hesitate to let people think the worst of him, but and he is pretty wicked and fun in a definitely fun way. And then Bale, who is his cousin, has decided that Lonnie is his fated mate, and so he's going to help her win these contests. And Scion wants to support his cousin, but also thinks that this is absolutely crazy. And also, Scion can't help but have feelings for her too, because this is a reverse harem story. The smut level is in this book, it is mostly teasing. There is on-screen sexual activity, but it's not overwhelming. The plot of the rebellion and who Scion is and who Bale is and how these all entangle and how to keep the country safe. All of that is also pretty important. And that I like complicated plots. They don't have to be super like. Not a fan of Death Note. That's a little too complicated, especially once you get past like the first season. But I like I like books, and I especially like smut books that have more than one aspect to them. They have more than one thing going on. I love my smutty, smutty smut, but I also love a good mystery. I love a little bit of violence. I like intrigue. I definitely like there to be some sort of stakes that's not just completely artificial and flat and made up to keep hearts racing. So again, she has Lonnie is not like other girls, but it's really done right in a way where it's hidden even from her. Like even she's in denial about some of the parts of her own past that maybe like she's not just lying to the reader; she is lying to herself. So that's very nice, and there's the whole mysterious power. Moving around in the land and she might be connected to it is also done really nice because it's not one and done. It's not one book and done. Right now, the fourth book is supposed to come out in October, and I'm not even sure that it will be completely finished by then. But I can say that even though we are at 4 books so far, there's been enough of new plot revealed, new events revealed, and enough intrigue that none of it feels like it's all just there for drama, and none of it feels like it's not contrived in any way. It all is just, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, what's going to happen next? It's very nicely paced. It's very, very nicely written. I highlight a lot. I have started buying books and highlighting the parts I like, and I have a lot of different colors in here because usually my fun smutty scenes are in pink, but I also highlight other things that I really like as like lines I really like and elements I really like as a writer. And you can see this has a lot of tags. It was really enjoyable, and I have the other 2 books, and they also have just as many tags. So they have just as many, and I'll probably end up breaking down the whole series at some point after I get the 4th book, because I like it that much, and I've really much been going back. I've pretty much been almost as soon as I finish it, I start to read the next book that I'm going to talk about, and then I come back and read these again because they all really remind me of each other, and they're all really, really satisfying reads. So the next book that I don't know exactly why all these books remind me of each other, but when I read one, I want to read the other. So the next book that I want to read is actually the second in a series. I've not read the first, but I have read the third. It's The Unseelie King and I by Milan Jax. So, or Milana Jax. It The main character is a poor, suddenly princess from the first book covers her sister falling in love with the Seelie prince. So this one is her falling in love with the Unseelie king. It's really cute. Both of the characters are super cute. I love them both so much. They are capricious, they are whimsical, they're maybe a little crazy. The main character, Augusta, has been named the Royal Seer, but she has very little magic and she has very little education because she's pretty much a farmer, and she has very little money. So she doesn't know much about the court or much. Um, she's not doing that well in court because she also is a very idealistic romantic. She sees that her older sister June, got a happily ever after with a prince, and it's not so much the prince, but his power to make her sister happy that she really likes. He could literally move the world to make her happy, and he does want to. So she's very idealistic. She's very sassy. Um, and she is frustrated because she being named a seer for a very, very minute amount of foresight. Uh, she, everybody knows that seers don't keep their powers if they have sex, if they're not a virgin. So she is very much clashing between her desire, now that romance and that kind of love has been proven to her, she wants that, and yet nature, fate doesn't seem to have that in store for her, and she kind of wants to refuse to accept it. But everyone around her also is treating her like a child, or is treating her like, some sort of virginal priestess that nobody can really interact with. So she's very, very frustrated with that, as anybody would be. And then the hero, the anti-hero, kind of. There's anti-hero vibes. So, but he really is a cinnamon roll, because all of the evil that he's done, as you find out in the book, is as cinnamon rolls do, to protect others. And we love that. We love villains who are actually, heart of gold. I'm a fan. So it's Amako. Amako. He is the king of the Unseelie court. He has been a recluse because of the level of his powers, and because he doesn't want to destroy people. His powers, it's really fun. He is what's called an army of one. He has powers to animate the things around him. He does so almost unconsciously, with the power slipping. So imagine Beauty and the Beast if all of the animated creatures were not creatures in their own right, but were just things he was subconsciously animating and giving a personality. So there is a lot of talking to himself, and even some therapy sessions through inanimate objects, than through him interacting with inanimate objects, which is a lot of fun. It's done really, it's written really well, and I enjoyed it. I have enjoyed it on my third reading, which I just completed. So Augusta Augusta runs into him when he is hiding in the garden, as he's just arrived to Silly Court, and he's not taking the suddenly being around a lot of bright lights and people well, and they have a really fun little conversation, and it's clear that there's a little something between them, and they, more than just like, it's not just a gut level, oh, this person is sexy and I want them. They really, really enjoy being around each other, even when there's not the sexy times going on. So this is a line that I particularly enjoyed, because it is probably one of the most legit Fae lines ever I have read in a book. Fae of all shapes and sizes, dressed in bright, standout colors, heads crowned with elaborate hairdos, adorned with expensive shiny jewels, linger on the winding staircase, sipping champagne from flutes, and laughing while sharing gossip of other people's misfortunes. I really like how the Fae are written in this book. Uh, I like how they're I like how they're all pretty intense, as traditional fae and stories usually are. They're obsessed with beauty. They're obsessed with manners in many ways, which a lot of them are. The author communicates really well and sets the scene by who has manners, who doesn't, how their manners are, how their food is, and all of that. That's just an element that I really enjoyed. But so the Unseelie King, Amako, is trying, his nephew and his sister-in-law have been trying to take over the court, and he does not want them to, so he is coming back. And in the last book, apparently, because again, I didn't read that one, the Seelie king's mother betrayed her son and tried to kill his fated mate. So they are hunting for her. Well, she happens to be in the Unseelie court. So now he wants something from them. He wants somebody to fake being his wife so that he can handle the attempted coup that's going on in his own court. And he has promised to turn over the Seelie queen mother who tried to kill her soon to be daughter in law in exchange for that. So Augusta is the only person he feels that he can actually bear because he really enjoyed his little conversation with her, and they dance, and she's a little bit fiery and spunky, but also um the good girl trope. So he genuinely enjoyed his time with her. So he decides he's going to ask for her. And of course, there is an issue because she's a seer. She's the sister of one of the Fates, who are one of the most powerful Fae in the land. And there are complicated feelings there. Amaku, or Amak, he doesn't think that he deserves any kind of happiness. He thinks he wants to preserve what's left of his family, which is why he hasn't acted before this. But he 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 doesn't want to act because he knows that his sister-in-law and his nephew are committing treason, and he knows that he can't let that stand. So it's almost a kindness that he has been hiding from them and not being involved, but time has come that he has to stop it, or else people are going to start getting hurt. And while he enjoys being around Augusta, he is very startled by how uneducated she is, um, about how much she doesn't know about her own powers, about history, about the Unseelie court. And that leads to, of course, her not being scared of him, her flirting wildly with him, but it also, and him really enjoying himself. There's an age gap, but the age gap is done well because even though Augusta is only like 19, they're both mentally about the same. They're both playful. They're both capricious. They're both in some ways idealistic. She's definitely romantic idealistic, and he sees his idealism as being a flaw that he now has to overcome because he's going to have to do something or destroy his family. So he's kind of battling with not wanting to, even though he's, older and bitter, he's battling with not wanting to accept how things really are. I I highly recommend all of this. It works great. The side characters, again, that's a big one. June is a very important part. Amiko's relationship with his sister is absolutely fantastic. There is some very short but poignant thoughts that he shares of his relationship with his brother, and it's like you just really amazing how an author can write such a tight and give you so much information in just how this person thinks about another person, how they relate to their own thoughts about a person. And those are the parts that I tended to highlight in here too, is, the very fey lines, and the way he feels about his sister, the way he felt about his brother, the fact that he's a bitter or trying, he's embracing the hero's whole scope in this book is trying to embrace that he is a bitter old curmudgeon, and yet the entire time he is with this very young, idealistic woman who is constantly playing with him and constantly reminding him to be playful and to be positive and to dream for yourself. And those are themes that I really enjoy in a book, and combined with the other things that I really enjoy, like the very positive side character histories and the way that they relate to each other, it makes for a really great read and I highly recommend it. Definitely one that, again, lots of reread value. Okay, last series. So this one isn't Face Smut. It's an older one. I like to address some of the ones that are still relatively new, but I also like to bring in some older ones that some of you book talk people, bookstagram people might have missed or might not be aware of. So the uh, this is the Pillars of the World. It's a 3-part series by Anne Bishop. Anne Bishop is one of my favorite autobi authors. She's mostly known for the Black Jewels trilogy, and she has a newer series that is more modern fantasy, kind of semi-urban fantasy. She is considered dark fantasy for when her Black Jewels first came out. It deals with a lot of it deals with gender violence, and these books definitely deal with a lot of blatant gender violence. This particular series, which is Pillars of the World, Shadows and Light, and The House of Gayan, which is the Tira Lane series. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm awful, but I'm a reader, not usually a speaker. Uh, they deal with fairies and they deal with witches, and it is a fictional retelling of the witch trials, the Inquisition, in a fantasy world setting. So in this first book, the main character, Ari, is the last witch in her family in a small town where witches are, let's say, disrespected. It really brings in they are hated because they have magic, but they also are desired because that magic gives them power, and they often have, as people say, or as the historical legends go, they often have the most fertile lands, they have the most luck, that kind of thing. She is very young. She is only like 17 or 18. She has her mother and her grandmother have both recently died, so she is trying to run the homestead completely alone while she is very much not capable of doing it. I like that it goes into a lot about how much effort it makes to take care of the animals and plow the fields and bake the bread for the day. And, I like that she goes into, as she befriends Faye, who become curious about her because parts of their world are closing off and they're not sure why. And they think that it's related to the witches. In the first book, they think that the witches are doing it out of spite. It turns out that that they are doing it because there is a force that is killing off the witches, so torturing and killing them off. Again, very big on the gendered violence. But it's a very interesting play between the fairy worlds, which are connected to the human worlds, and the things in the human worlds that are affecting the fairy worlds, and just the entire balance of the fae and the humans. Ari is tricked by a hedge witch into tying herself to a magical fancy, which some of the village girls have asked the hedge witch to make so that they can try to magically compel the men that they want into being with them. The person who wanted to do this was hoping to catch a fae, because the fae do roam the world. Uh, she does not succeed, but she traps herself in a magical spell that has her required to offer herself for one full moon cycle to whoever eats the other half of the candy. One of the village men is literally hunting her down because he knows about it and he wants to be the other half. He has been inappropriate with her before, and he has used his influence over the humans in the area to try to force her into a relationship. So there's those aspects. Um, Instead, she goes to her mother's favorite place along the ocean, and she finds a horse, and a wild horse, and she shares it with the wild horse instead. Well, of course, it turns out that the wild horse is a Fey prince in disguise, and while the Fey are trying to figure out why the witches have declared war on them and are terrorizing their world and closing down parts of their world, he also is falling in love with this woman who is revealed to be a fae or be a witch. So there are other fae from that community who he influences to come down and help her because, of course, it ties into all the work is difficult. She's there on her own. They have no idea of this because they live in this perfect realm where food just magically appears and everything that they need is given to them. They don't understand the concept of work. There's just pleasure and everything is provided for you. So they are intrigued by her, both her kindness, her knowledge, because it's a completely different kind of world to them. Several of the other fae in this town's household, because they're very tight knit communities in each town and everything, and they tend to be the same kind of families. Uh, Several of them do begin to genuinely build a friendship with her. They like her. She's kind. They have a hard time resolving how she is capable of destroying their world. She doesn't seem like she's the type or anything. And of course, that leads them directly into the bigger overarching plot of the trilogy. Because while Ares in the first book is the first book is almost entirely about Ares and Ares' story. From there, it goes on to other characters, other towns, and it moves more to the Inquisition storyline and the nature of the connection between the Fae and the witches. So Aries okay, but ultimately her story is pretty sad, and very she's not my favorite character. She's certainly not my least favorite character. She is a product of the situation that she's in. She is very innocent. She is very unknowing of her own history. She wants to believe in positive things, but the world is very oppressive and very much against her. And sometimes I have those feelings too. So sometimes it's hard for me to connect with a character who is overwhelmed by their inability to affect the world. It's just kind of a personal thing. I enjoy I enjoy some of the other characters in the other books because they have more agency, they have more knowledge, they have more ability and willingness. Ari just wants her family, and as soon as she gets close to getting her family, her story's kind of done. There are other characters who want to save the world, and that's a little more compelling to me. That's a little more interesting of a read. Uh, there are a lot of the same characters throughout. The Fae Prince is, I really like the way that Bishop has set up the Fae in this, because there are each Fae have their elements, and some can shapeshift, and like there's the Lord of the Horse can shapeshift into the horse. Sometimes their talents are conflicted or combined. The Lord of the Fae that Ari meets is the Lord of Fire, but he can also shapeshift into a horse because he is also a Lord of the Horse. There is a Lord of, or a Lady of, and then there's the person with the biggest power, who is head of those people. So not only are there families, and not only are there towns, but then there are also groups based on powers, based on that heritage. And that heritage doesn't always follow family to family. And that heritage doesn't always it doesn't always concentrate in one town or anything. So that's interesting. So you meet a variety of lords of fire, lords of hunt, ladies of song. Two of the characters in here are the Muse, uh, and that's actually one of my favorite characters. The Muse and the Bard, they become very, very influential characters who go from Ares Town and try to find the truth and try to directly impact the the big plot that's happening. One of my other favorite ones is the Gatherer, who is literally a Fae of Death, but she becomes Ari's best friend and her fiercest defender, and it's a beautiful friendship that I really like. This very much love and light person, and this I like how the Gatherer is depicted. Her task is very grim and she sees awful things, but she's really ultimately there to bring quiet and peace to people who have died, especially those who have died tragically. She's there to say it's over now. Let me hear your truth. Let me take you to the beyond where you can have a new experience. The Gatherer reminds me a lot of Discworld, Terry Pratchett's Discworld's Death, who Death is one of the most positive and most heroic characters in the entire Discworld. This also makes her a pretty girl, so I am a fan of that. I really enjoy this series. There's not smut in it. There is a lot of sexual content in the sense that, again, gendered violence. So, that kind of gendered violence is definitely heavily implied, if not, there are scenes that tease it. But and there's romance. The Bard and the Muse decide to go about the human way and become, to get married and to be monogamous and to love each other, and that's beautiful. There are really beautiful love stories. There are beautiful sibling stories. There are beautiful found family stories, all set in this really horrific. There is this outside force who wants to destroy us just because we exist. And some days I feel that there's a lot of characters, so and it shifts third person in different characters. So if you don't like one character, stick around. You're probably gonna find another character that you like. There's lots of world building, lots of description of expansive territories and cities and different cultures and customs. There is ultimately, despite the darkness and maybe the very high trigger warning content, there is a sense of justice. There is a sense of satisfaction with all the outcome. There's a lot of elements of horror without it being an outright horror story. Definitely dark fantasy, but if you like your darker fantasy, if you like horror without guaranteed horror endings, then this is a good one to pick up. If you're fascinated with witches, then this is a good one to pick up. I enjoy her other books too, but this is my favorite series of hers. So those are my recommendations for today. I enjoy good fairy smut. I read lots of fairy smut. One of the things that I find myself drawn to time and time again is the fairy smut. I like different. I recently finished other How Does It Feel and What Did You Do by Jean O'Reilly, which I also enjoyed. I think I enjoyed it. So send me your fairy smut. What do you want me to read? What do you think I should read? If you've read any of these books, tell me what you think. Tell me if you liked them. Do you want the smut? Do you want less smut? I can go either way. Next time, I think I might do, I don't know, at some point I'm going to do vampires. At some point, I have a couple of books about Lust as a character that I want to talk about. And of course, werewolves. I'm a fan of a big fan of werewolves. So, maybe I might get into those. Uh, Tell me what you think. And hopefully it won't be another like 8 months before I do this again. Thanks, Stacy, for pushing me into it. Bye.